Hey everyone, Clio here. New hair, same me. Today it is Earth Hour, and so I wanted to talk to you guys about a book that I've just read, which is We Are the Weather by Jonathan Safran Foer. So this is a book all about climate change, and Earth Hour is intended to shine a light on climate change initiatives. So basically the idea is that for 1 hour tonight, I think it is between 8 and 9, but I'll have it on the screen if I was wrong about that, you turn off all of your lights to kind of show your commitments to helping tackle climate change. Now, climate change, sadly enough, isn't really a sexy topic to talk about, but which people will often be put off by, especially if you are trying to convince them to take action. And this book is actually talking about just that. It's talking about the paradox between the fact that most people understand that climate change is an issue. Most people understand the gravity of the situation, at least on some level. We all understand that there is a huge risk here, or the majority of understand that the future is looking bleak and that if we don't take drastic action, we cannot reverse what is happening at the moment. However, even though most of us understand that, even though most of us will hear those facts and will not contest them or will not question them, one thing that is missing is taking action. And so one of the things that Safran Foer is diving into with this book is the reason why. The reason why climate change is not eliciting a strong response, is not eliciting that sense of urgency that is actually needed to tackle this crisis. So I thought that was very interesting to kind of look at that sort of paradox between understanding something and taking action on something. Apart from talking about that sort of paradox that I think is essential to realize, it's essential to see that sort of dynamic and to understand that we are kind of self-sabotaging by not taking this threat seriously. What he then dives into is kind of individual actions that we can take. And I think it's very important to talk about those, because a lot of times when people mention individual actions, the sort of response that will come is that the individual has no impact. A lot of times people are very skeptical of like the impact that an individual can have. A lot of people will say like, yeah, but we won't be able to stop climate change just because you turn vegetarian, for example. And that is definitely true, but that's kind of the tragedy of that sort of a statement, the tragedy of that sort of an attitude towards individual change. Because yes, if individual change stays on the individual level, then it won't have an impact. But if many individuals make that individual change, if enough people do that, that will definitely have an impact. And what Safran Foer is kind of indicating here is that we need to reduce meat consumption by about 80%. We need to reduce dairy consumption by about 60%. And if we are not going to make individual changes in our meat consumption, then it's never going to happen. The meat industry isn't just going to cut down its production rate just because climate change is a problem. It is going to depend on the market. It is going to depend on consumer choices. So if we don't make those steps, then nothing is going to change. And so he draws a parallel there between World War II and with our current climate change situation, in that in World War II, many Americans were asked to ration their food in order for more supplies to be able to go towards the army. In order for the army to be supplied more fully, in order for the soldiers to have enough strength to fight these battles for the common people. And so he indicates within his text that while it isn't the case that individual rationing won the war, it's very likely that the war couldn't have been won without those individual rationings. And so a lot of times in that sort of statement of the individual change not being enough kind of really irks me. So I was very happy to see it talked about within this book, because even when we go to a higher level, for example, here in Belgium, what we will often also hear is like, what impact do we as Belgians have on the total consumption within this world? If we reduce our carbon emissions, that's not going to have an impact. It's countries like the US and China who need to change. But that's the opinion of every single country except for the US and China then. Every other one of these countries is saying the same, like if I do it, it's not a big deal. All of those other countries need to do it. But if none of these individual countries, for example, are going to make these efforts, then nobody's making the efforts and that nothing's getting done. So I liked that this book is definitely diving into that dynamic and definitely indicating that it's not the case that you as an individual can do nothing. Your changes can have an impact if enough of you are making those changes. Apart from talking about that sort of need for individual changes, this book also has a short section in which there's very clear, comprehensible data surrounding climate change. One of its main takeaways from that section being that if we don't reduce meat consumption, there's no way that we can tackle climate change. And I think one of the main appeals of this book is that it gives you that data, but it's not necessarily telling you, so you should all become vegan or vegetarian now. He himself has struggled with becoming vegetarian in the past. He has had many relapses, for example, but he is saying that if you cannot make that choice, if you cannot commit to going fully vegetarian, then one of the options that you could actually go for is, rather than just saying, okay, fine, whatever, I will just stay the same, I will make zero changes. Maybe you can then make sort of a decision, for example, to only eat meat at dinner time. So cutting out meat and dairy out of your diet for breakfast and lunch, for example, already 2 out of the 3 meals of the day. And so I very much think that that is an interesting point to take. I know that I've seen some interviews when he was here in Belgium in which people then say like, yeah, but that's not enough. But the alternative of not doing anything is worse than the alternative of not doing enough. Sure, it might not be enough, but if everybody is willing to take these sort of steps, we're already so much closer to helping tackle this problem than if nobody is going to take them, because the steps required are too big. And what I definitely appreciate about Jonathan Safran Foer's nonfiction writing is that you can see that he is a novelist writing nonfiction. He is coming at it from the perspective of telling a story, and he will be linking the non-fiction subject to stories, to storytelling. And so that is definitely the case throughout here as well. And one of the sort of like interesting sections that for me just droned on just a little bit too long is a section in which he's kind of having this internal debate between two sides of himself. That the side that wants to make the change, that is giving him all of the rational sort of motivation, all of the rational reasons why he should be making a change, and then his reluctant side, the side of him that doesn't really want to take action because it means compromising on certain aspects of his life, because it means making certain smaller sacrifices to things that he has gotten used to having accessible in his life. And so I absolutely think that this is a great book to dive into this subject matter, a great book for you to read if you want to tackle climate change, if you find yourself having some sort of like inner resistance to tackling your lifestyle in order to help tackle climate change, if you have people in your surroundings who in your opinion aren't taking climate change seriously, I would definitely say it's a great book to read, and it's a very readable book as well. You know, it's not hard and dry facts. As I said, it is a non-fiction book written by a fiction writer. He is a lauded fiction writer as well. He has written many acclaimed novels, and so the way in which he frames this narrative, the way in which he frames this message is definitely very digestible. It's an easy read. I read it in just 5 hours in one go. That's probably not going to be everybody's journey with this book neither, but I will also say it was far from being a chore to go through this one in one go. So highly encourage you guys to pick this one up. And if you want more after finishing We Are the Weather, I think Eating Animals serves as a nice companion to this book, because it is all about the meat industry, but it doesn't really focus in on the environmental aspect of it. It's obviously referred to within the book, but it's not its main focus. That book will be mainly looking at the animal cruelty aspect of things, but also on the impact on our health, for example. And just as with We Are the Weather, it's very much a digestible read. It's less digestible in the sense that it's difficult to read about the animal cruelty side of that book, but I do definitely think that the way in which that story is told is a very interesting way. With Eating Animals, I think there's this sort of belief that has grown that you cannot read Eating Animals without becoming a vegetarian, that the message of Eating Animals is that you should become a vegetarian, whereas that's not the case. Eating Animals very much zooms in on the animal cruelty aspect of the industrialization of the meat industry and on the risk to our health of certain practices now common in sort of like factory farms, or the huge sort of like meat conglomerates, but it also talks to, for example, small cattle owners, to smaller businesses that are still in the meat business, talking to them about the way in which it can be done differently. But We Are the Weather basically carries that same sort of message, that message of we need to take steps, we need to tackle this problem now, and we don't necessarily need to go the full route of going fully vegetarian or fully vegan if that is not an option to you, or if you are not willing to make that type of an adjustment to your lifestyle. You can take smaller steps. And I kind of want to reinforce that sort of message in the sense that it is okay that you're starting small, and you don't necessarily need to feel like I don't need to take that step at all, because if I'm just going to take such a teeny tiny step, then I might as well take no step. But who knows, taking that tiny step might show you that that has had like zero impact on your life, and might lead you to take other tiny steps, and over time those tiny steps do definitely accumulate, and hopefully you taking these tiny steps can help inspire others to take these steps, can help make these steps more accessible to others, show others that there are things that we as individuals can do, that we as individuals can make a difference. And so I'd like to end it on a quote of Gandhi: "Be the change you want to see in the world." So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and see you guys for a future one. Bye!